Max Morrow. New entry alert, right? This is a great question from the title of this video that we're about to break down right now, right? Anarchism. Is a world without rulers possible? Golly. Yo, who the hell was you waiting on to ask that question before you asked it? God damn, you know what I'm saying? Yo, shout out Max Morrow for this one, man. Anarchism. Anarchism. I don't even know what to call it, man, because to be frank with you, I didn't even know what the definition of the word was, right? So all I had for this intro was the definition, right? Textbook definition. Anarchy is a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority or other controlling systems. Now, you know, living in the world that we live in, right, as time goes, I feel like it might just be possible. You know what I'm saying? A world without any authoritative input might just be possible, but then it's like, yo, what is the world finna look like beyond that, right? Right? Let's see.
We can't go back to beginning. This existential crisis, the reason I cannot keep competing and keep on living. So it's back against the world, seeing all your value once you dealt with all the dirt. Backing up slowly from these diamonds and pearls, quote unquote. Fat lady sings, I see the writing on the walls. Back to the scene cause it was pride before the fall, and now it's just over.
What's good? What's good? What's good with it? Good to see you. That was actually, look, I'm gonna introduce something new, right? I'm gonna introduce the what shall I call it? The snapshot of the snapshot of the mood, right? Like the snapshot, just the face, a snapshot of my, like an expression, a meme of how I'm feeling, because I hope you feeling cool, right? Or of how things are on my side. I'm just gonna give you a facial expression. That was it. That's it. That's it right there. That was it right there. You know what I'm saying? Go figure. Go figure. I don't know, man. You know, I be bored as shit when I be at work, bruh. You know what I'm saying? So it gives me time to be thinking about probably, you know, ideas of what to implement. You know what I'm saying? When I be going live and stuff, I think I need my little, you know what I mean? Just moisturize. My fault. I know to some of y'all this might be rude doing it in front of y'all, you know what I'm saying? This is damn near SE actual act. just over. That's saying. Gotta stay moisturize, man. But yeah, oh my fault, get down. I ain't even introduced nothing. I was just excited to see you though. You feel me? Anarchism, right? That's what we're looking at. Is a world without rulers possible? Wrong. The reason why I coined this channel Dark Mode Reactions, right, is because I want to focus more on maybe subconscious kind of activities that us as humans be on and are not necessarily aware of. You know what I'm saying? That could possibly lead to just like collectives of human effects on nature. You understand what I'm saying? That might just like give us possible, you know, outcomes of reality, so to speak. Outcomes in nature of reality, right? Outcomes in nature. So we all are, you know what I'm saying, are subconscious, or let our subconscious aspects lead us as a collective. What kind of realities are we faced with? That's the kind of reactions I want to take a look into, because I know a whole lot of people are not into, you know, the dark mode, you know what I'm saying, the shadow aspects of society. Let me call it that. And I do feel like anarchism might speak to that. You know what I'm saying? the ignorance of within society, the possibility of what this ignorance may bring. Oh my God, anarchy! Alright, Max Morrow alert. That's the channel. If y'all wanna go check it out yourselves, y'all can go check it out. If y'all wanna go check it out without me, shit, I don't know. I wasn't invited and shit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let's get into it.
To be governed
is
to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed.
No, hold on.
Law-driven, numbered.
Bro, I feel like, you know, as a government, you know what I'm saying? Okay, opening remarks. These are the opening remarks. I might yap a lot, so you might just want to maybe, you know, skip ahead. I don't know how long. But, you know, opening remarks, bro, to govern people, right? Trying to oversee people, right? To a certain extent, we are overseeing. We are maintaining some sort of law, order, you know what I'm saying, among the people, so that civilization can commence, right? Like civilized natures to the human aspect, right? Those can like come forth and we can all just live with one another. And in order for you to do that, you need all these details, brother. You need, you know what I'm saying? You need to be watching them. You need to be just like counting them. You know what I'm saying? Statisticalize. Oh my God, statisticalize. Yes, to build statistics and build a framework of the people you govern. You feel me? Tally up the things, do your homework, keep watch, you know what I'm saying? That's part of like the responsibility, I would say, right? My bad.
Regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled,
all of that.
Checked, estimated, valued, censored, commanded by creatures who have neither the right nor the wisdom nor the virtue to do so.
Ooh,
to be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction, noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is under pretext of public utility and in the name of the general interest to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, squeezed, hoaxed, robbed, then at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint, to be repressed, fined, vilified, harassed, hunted down, abused, clubbed, disarmed,
See what the fuck they was doing to that girl, bro? What?
bound, choked, imprisoned, judged, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and to crown all, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality.
Nice. Damn, he gave one hell of a definition. He gave one hell of an expression there to his definition. Golly. Damn, brother. I only said, yo, government just oversees motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? You had to write a whole essay, man. I feel you, though.
I've been really engaged in politics for close to a decade now.
Why?
But in all that time, there's one political philosophy I've never given the proper chance.
What's up?
Anarchism. Now
Let's
look,
go.
as someone who spent way too much time on the internet, I've obviously seen people describe themselves as anarchists or anarcho-communists, and they've got their cute little flag on their Twitter profile picture, but if I'm being totally honest, it's all just seemed a little unserious to me. For the most part, I've just associated anarchism with, well, what everyone associates anarchism with.
What is that?
Violence, chaos, riots, satanic rock music, graffiti.
Rebellion, looting, boom, the purge. Facts.
And perhaps worst of all, the Joker.
Yep. Oh yeah. That Joker movie, especially at the end, it's a clear visualization of just like, oh yes.
Anarchy.
Not gonna lie, if your average layman's understanding of my political philosophy was limited to that single scene from The Dark Knight and fucking 9 gag quotes, I'd probably do something very drastic to myself. For as long as anarchists have been writing and organizing, they've had to deal with this negative stigma around the term anarchy in the pursuit of political legitimacy. Seriously, just have a look at what Emma Goldman was writing over 116 years ago. Anarchism represents to the unthinking what the proverbial bad man does to the child. A black monster bent on swallowing everything, in short, destruction and violence. It's been an uphill battle for these guys.
Basically, that's when the human gets in touch with his primal nature. Right? Yeah, that's when you just like go wild and, you know, go crazy and, you know what I'm saying, just be an animal. You know what I mean? Just let all those natures run wild. Right?
And as I've discovered in the process of writing and researching this video, it's a shame that this is how most people see anarchism. At least in my view, it's a political philosophy with an extremely rich intellectual history that has a lot to teach us about the world today. You know, even if the writings of Peter Kropotkin don't turn you into a mask-wearing, Molotov-slinging, insurrectionary anarchist, I still think there's enormous value to be gained from some of the ideas here. And so, that's what we're here to take a look at today. What is anarchism? What do they stand for and against? How would society even function? And has it ever worked in history? These are all very important questions with rather complex answers, but as long as you walk away from this video in like an hour and a half, understanding that there's more to anarchism than just Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight, you're further along than like 99% of people. But okay, the most logical place to start with anarchism is with the etymology of the term itself. And fortunately for us, it's pretty straightforward. In ancient Greek, the term an means without, and the term archos means chief or ruler. If you smack them together, that's how you end up with anarchy, aka without ruler, or the absence of rulers. And look, as much as it is an unfair characterization, that etymology does come off a little bit childish. I wouldn't be surprised if your mind immediately went to some entitled little toddler screaming, "I don't care about the rules," as their mum's like dragging them to their cot for their early afternoon nap. Obviously, if your political philosophy resembles that mental image in any capacity, it's going to be a little challenging to win hearts and minds. However, as any anarchist will be extremely quick to inform you today, the idea of no rulers doesn't mean no rules. This is by far the single biggest misconception surrounding anarchism, as most people simply view it as a synonym for the term chaos. You know,
no rulers doesn't necessarily mean no rules, but then who brings the rules? You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't the word rules a derivative from ruler? I don't know. Because somebody has to come through and bring the rules, bruh. Is what I'm saying, right? Somebody got to be the Moses. You know what I'm saying? Pull up with what has to happen, bruh. Like, you got to know like what's up, like, you know? Somebody got to do it.
If things are in a state of anarchy, our mind is immediately going to a scene from Mad Max Fury Road, not some perfectly peaceful and organized farming commune. But, to quote Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the first person to label himself as an anarchist all the way back in the 1840s, as man seeks justice in equality, so society seeks order in anarchy. As we'll soon discover, anarchists have a lot of criticisms for the idea of government, but that doesn't mean they're advocating for a world of chaos and disorder. In fact, you don't have to look any further than the symbol for anarchism itself to understand why. As you can see here, the letter A obviously represents anarchy, but it's engulfed with a big letter O, which represents order. These two ideals are deeply intertwined, and sure,
I almost thought that was like Avengers or some shit. Boom. Alright, my bad.
It might be true that the French artist who designed the symbol back in the 1960s has gone on record saying that there isn't any deeper meaning to the—
What the fuck, man? That's just like, who designed it? This is just the letter A. Like, this is just the letter A, bro. Like, unless you're telling me he came up with the alphabet, bro. It's just a goddamn letter A, brother, with a circle around it. Chill, bruh. It's like probably, you know, people that maybe meat ride the person that designed the Japan flag. Like, you know, like there's no like meat riding needed there, bruh. Like, this shit is just like a red dot on the thing. Red dot. Red eye. Red eye. Just a red dot, brother. Chill.
The symbol, but my English teacher said there's meaning to be found in everything, so we're running with it. Now, unfortunately, the moment we move past the mere etymology of anarchism is the moment that we run into a few issues. As it turns out, anarchism is more of an umbrella term, which, yes, does have some general overriding principles, but there's such a diverse and wide range of thought that it can make it kind of hard to comprehend. Just for reference, we've got egoist anarchism, green anarchism, anarcho-communism, collectivist anarchism, anarcho-syndicalism, insurrectionary anarchism, libertarian socialism, anarcho-transhumanism, mutualism, illegalism, anarcho-feminism, cyber-anarchism, anarchism, and the people's champion, anarcho-primitivism. Shout out to my eco-terrorist goat, Ted Kaczynski. And look, whilst there might be some overlap between a green anarchist and an anarcho-feminist, a mutualist who advocates for a form of market socialism is fundamentally incompatible with an anarcho-communist who wants to do away with the concept of markets entirely and distribute goods according to necessity. To quote my favorite Epstein affiliate, Noam Chomsky, there have been many styles of thought and action that
What the hell?
have been referred to as anarchists. It would be hopeless to try to encompass all of these conflicting tendencies in some general theory or ideology. And look, whilst Chomsky is definitely right that some general theory of anarchism would be impossible, I think there is one core value which unites all these different schools of thought together.
Oh, brother. Damn, because I thought you was going you was gonna go through every single aspect of those anarchical whatevers. You know what I'm saying? Those what do they call that? the small versions, the mini versions. I thought you was gonna go through all of that. Give us the general. Thank you.
Freedom. To quote anarchist author Peter Gelderloos,
freedom. At anarchism's heart is a simple and convincing proposition. People know how to live their own lives and organize themselves better than any expert could. Exactly.
Anarchism's heart is a simple and convincing proposition. People know how to live their own lives and organize themselves better than any expert could. This is the core tenet which all of anarchism comes back to. People should be free. They should be free to choose who they decide to become. They should be free to choose how they present themselves to the world. They should be free to choose what they contribute to the common good, and they should be free to choose who they associate with.
Oh my god, okay, now we reach that dilemma that we're here to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. Golly. Think about it, bro. If, like, I think to a certain extent the world has accommodated a whole bunch of, you know, like different ideas from groups of people, collectives of people, pockets of people, however. You feel what I'm saying? But then now you get, oh my, you get to politicize the whole thing once we do that, right? Like the politics of the land just like escalate, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the dynamics that we, you know what I mean, we get to see. Like, for example, man, you know, the whole thing where, you know, gay rights, but now, you know, now society was opening up so that the gay minds can like have their way. Okay, cool. There's people who think freely, there's people who think traditionally, you know what I'm saying? People who are really religious, strictly religious, people who are, you know what I'm saying, people who practice their religions respectively, their different religions respectively, you feel what I'm saying, all the way to yeah, I don't know when it comes to Satanism, you know what I'm saying. I heard that one was still illegal to like practice, I don't know, and for obvious reasons. Hey, let me not get into, but these things, they exist. And now with presenting, you know, freedom, being like, yo, y'all can be free, it's like a whole lot of these ideas can clash with one another, especially when we are, we actually live in a land more than ever where you see a whole lot of people's expression to not let the other exist because of the fact that they are different, they are other. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it were up to people, a whole lot of people wouldn't exist. You understand what I'm saying? And so therefore, it's tricky, man. It becomes like a tricky kind of situation where it's like, okay, the right thing is to present everybody with freedom, but is that really the right thing? This freaking topic is kind of layered, bruh. Let me not, because now I'm gonna get into other rabbit holes. Let me let Buddy finish first.
To borrow the words of Emma Goldman, only in freedom can man grow to his full stature. Only in freedom will he learn to think and move and give the very best in him. Only in freedom will he realize the true force of the social bonds which knit men together and which are the true foundation.
Okay, now look, the whole freedom thing, right? The whole freedom thing in terms of, you know, what I was explaining now, you know what I mean? Subjectively it makes sense. Subjectively, yes, like everybody should, and I feel like everybody does have the space to you know, experience their own freedom, you know, experience their own selves, their own identity through their freedom, you know what I'm saying, to do so. You know what I mean? But then it's like, subjectively though, You know what I'm saying? Not everybody's religious, is my point. It's like subjectively, because now you get minds that want to convince other people, you know what I'm saying, to think like them. And we're not in the business of convincing, right? I hope anarchism covers that, right? I hope it addresses that.
Of a normal social life. For an anarchist, freedom is the foundational precondition for human flourishing. Without it, people can't develop their own mental faculties, they're relying on others to tell them what to think and what to do, and ultimately, they just can't dictate the terms of their own life, which suffocates potential. For example, when artists had to conform to Stalin's doctrine of socialist realism, which only permitted art that glorified life in the Soviet Union, he basically put a hard cap on the full range of human creativity and our potential as a byproduct. Like sure, no one is saying that this painting of Lenin doesn't go insanely fucking hard, but it's just not a truly authentic representation of the artist and their full creative potential. Now, it's also important to note that anarchists conceptualize freedom in terms of both positive and negative liberty.
Okay, before we go to the positives and negatives, I just want to co-sign the point that you were making, actually, with regards to saying that freedom does let you get in touch with, what you've mentioned, you know what I'm saying, like who you really are. And, with me, I can, my small little story that doesn't even matter, but you're on my channel, so you about to hear all of them. Sit down and let me, allow me to let you know that, yeah, when I, left my mama's basement, you feel me? Like, okay, we didn't have a basement at home, just like when I left my mama's house, right? Well, I left my mom's house, bro, like, I feel like it was the most necessary thing, but it was something I literally feared it, bro. Like, I was scared of it. You know what I'm saying? I was I wanted to latch onto the nest, for longer. And then, until nature just had to remind me that, yo, nah, it's over with. But then, you know what I'm saying? That whole transition was hard, therefore. But then, being by myself, like, yo, I've tapped into aspects of myself where, being with the old folks, being with the authority, right? Being with my parents, the government, right? Like, there's certain things you cannot express. There's certain aspects of you that you keep hidden. And until you just, like, fly away from the nest, you feel what I'm saying? Only then you can experience yourself fully. You know what I'm saying? Because for as long as you're under their surveillance or whatever, yeah, there's certain things you cannot be absolutely free, bruh. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not like you can like bring the whole hood and come, host what's that, Project X type party like in your mama's house and smash every girl that you had a crush on, like, in your mama's bedroom, and do as you know what I'm saying? But in your, at your own spot, you can. You feel what I'm saying? It's just like simple, trivial things like that. It's just a simple little example, but yeah, bro, I feel you on that one type shit.
If you don't know, negative liberty is basically the idea that we should be free from external interference and obstacles, whereas positive liberty is the idea that people need resources and opportunities to actualize their potential.
Negative what?
And negative liberty. If you don't know, negative liberty is basically the idea that we should be free from external interference and obstacles, whereas positive liberty is the idea that people need resources and opportunities to actualize their potential in the first place.
So be governed. So positive liberty is like being governed. Because you get those. Okay.
If we go back to our example of the Soviet artists, not only should they be free from some arbitrary creative doctrine imposed by a despot, i.e. negative liberty, they should also have the opportunity to cultivate their talents in the first place with all the necessary resources, i.e. positive liberty. That means they would have had access to brushes, canvases, different types of paints, and an art.
See what I'm saying? Access to that. Who gives the access to that? Who gives the access to that? Your father, the government, duh. Okay, nah, that was too far. That was too much. My fault.
A teacher who could guide them along the way. Without both of these forms of liberty, an anarchist wouldn't consider somebody to be truly free. Now, this belief in the idea of positive liberty puts anarchists in direct opposition to the modern libertarian movement, which is solely fixated on the idea of negative liberty. Whilst they're all for cutting taxes, legalizing drugs, and, well, lowering the age of consent, libertarians couldn't care less about providing people with the opportunities they need to succeed in the first place. If you lived in a libertarian's idealized society and were born into poverty through no fault of your own, that's just tough luck, buddy. You're just never going to get the same chance to actualize your potential like the kid born on the other side of town into a rich family. Now, with all that being said, there's an important caveat to how anarchists understand freedom. To actualize the type of positive liberty which allows every individual the opportunity to flourish and develop themselves, well, that requires the cooperation of the community at large. To quote Zoe Baker, anarchism's central ethical value is that individuals should lead free lives. Although anarchists focus on the freedom of the individual, they do not conceptualize this freedom in terms of an isolated, abstract entity who stands outside of society. For anarchists, an individual can, given the kind of animal that humans are, only be free if they belong to a community of equals, bonded together through relations of solidarity. Anarchists view the values of freedom, equality, and solidarity as interdependent, such that they cannot be understood.
Hold on. Anarchists viewed the values of freedom, equality, and solidarity as interdependent, such that they cannot be understood in isolation from one another. The realization of one of these values can only be achieved through the realization of all three at once.
In isolation from one another. The realization of one of these values can only be achieved through the realization of all three at once. Or, to borrow the slightly more poetic language of Mikhail Bakunin, society, far from decreasing his freedom.
So what, you cannot be an anarchist by yourself? Is that what you're saying? Like, it's something that's coined, you know, on a collective of people. So it's a collective now, you know what I'm saying?
On the contrary, creates
an anarchy of people. Oh my god, wait. I think that kind of makes sense. It rings off the tongue pretty decent. I'm not gonna lie.
The individual freedom of all human beings. Society is the root, the tree, and liberty is its fruit. So yes, whilst anarchists are deeply concerned with the freedom of the individual, they also recognize the type of species we are. To put it simply, we Homo sapiens don't exist as these atomized units who are entirely self-sufficient, and we start to lose our fucking minds if we're separated from our fellow man and woman for too long. This is because, by nature, we are deeply cooperative and social beings who rely on one another to flourish, and any conception of individual freedom must be rooted in that understanding. If it isn't, that's how we end up veering into libertarian thought and its way of thinking about things wrongly. So,
and that's how we get to fall in love with freaking AI. Boom. What? I ain't gonna lie, man. Talk about it. What? Hell yeah, you lose that human touch, it's over.
Now that we understand what anarchists are for, we just have to flip everything we learned on its head to understand what they're against. Essentially, what is the exact opposite of all people being free and equal? Well, as any anarchist would be quick to tell you, that would be domination and hierarchy. Any system which allows one person to subjugate another person or group of people is simply a non-starter for anarchists. If you've got somebody sitting atop a hierarchy in an immense position of power who can basically force other people to do things against their will under the threat of coercion, well, that's just fundamentally incompatible with the principle of all people being free and equal. Now, just to be abundantly clear, although anarchists are definitely against the type of authority which allows one person to compel others to do things against their will, they are definitely not against the type of authority which comes along with competency and expertise. To quote Bakunin once again, does it follow that I reject all authority? Far from me such a thought. In the matter of
So not all authority is bad authority, according to the anarchist.
of boots, I refer to the authority of the bootmaker. Concerning houses, canals, or railroads, I consult that of the architect or the engineer. But I allow neither the bootmaker, nor the architect, nor savant to impose his authority upon me. I listen to them freely and with all the respect merited by their intelligence, their character, their knowledge, reserving always my incontestable right of criticism.
But do you comply to their you know, to their ways of just like them utilizing you and using you, and you know what I'm saying, for just, how can I put this, for their agenda, right? Basically taking you away from your anarchist ideas. You feel me? I listen to them freely and with all the respect merited by the intelligence, their character, their knowledge. Or is it a matter of like you negotiate the whole time? Like, yes, I hear you, brother, but wait, there is this to it, da da da, and then you present your counter arguments and shit.
And censor. I do not content myself with consulting a single authority in any special branch. I consult several, I compare their opinions, and choose that which seems to me.
So second, third, fourth opinion type guy. Can't make up your mind ass type nigga.
The soundest. We obviously want to live in a society where there are highly trained doctors and engineers who excel at the things they do, and anarchists literally have no problem with this whatsoever. It would only become problematic if, I don't know, the best physician in town was recommending you like a certain type of surgery, and then at the end they were like, and if you don't get this knee replacement, I'm gonna beat you to death with a club. It's at that point where merit and expertise becomes a justification for coercive force that anarchists would be throwing up a big red flag.
Yeah.
Or I guess a black flag would probably make more sense. But okay, this is all just hierarchy in an abstract and conceptual sense. When it comes to the real world, what are the actual systems of hierarchy and domination which anarchists want to dismantle? Well, unsurprisingly, that's a pretty long list. But if I had to pick out the two most prominent examples which basically unite all anarchists together, it would be the state and capitalism. Good news to all 10 of you that watch these videos.
Yes.
We've got a bit of an upgrade this year.
Number 11, buddy. Nah, I just bumped into your channel like right now. Alright, my fault. Let me look. There you go. Right? That kind of counts, right?
See that? It's like magic. Alright,
nice,
this is where things start to get a little more interesting. Before we properly kick things off, I want to start this section with a very important note. From the anarchist perspective, the state and capitalism are inseparable. These guys are two peas in an oppressive pod, and this is something which...
Well, in the West, right? We gotta clarify that, in the West. But obviously, you know what I'm saying, that model of the West influenced the rest of the world so much that, you know, damn near the rest of the world, you know, lives that way, right? It's like their government and capitalism is inseparable. I don't think that's supposed to be that way. Like, as in, the private sector govern the people of your country type. So basically, government be, you know, whatever, you know, the role players of whatever stock exchange that you got going. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then amongst those chairpersons or chair people, they pick a president. A president. Okay.
Anarchists have been painfully aware of for a while. To quote Peter Kropotkin all the way back in 1903. Furthermore, the state and capitalism are, in our opinion, inseparable concepts. In history, these institutions develop side by side, mutually supporting and reinforcing each other. They're bound together, not by a mere coincidence of contemporaneous development, but by the bond of cause and effect and cause. Capitalism, i.e. the economic system we all live under, in which the means of production are privately owned and used to generate a profit, is reliant on the state for protection. According to anarchists, if it wasn't for the police, courts, and prisons, all institutions which uphold private property, then capitalism wouldn't be able to function. Think about it like this. If you had some ultra-rich segment of the population sitting on their Scrooge McDuck pile of coins, whilst everyone else in society is impoverished and there's no police to call or courts to enforce laws, the workers aren't just gonna sit around twiddling their thumbs all day doing nothing. Because they massively outnumber the rich, they're gonna organize themselves and take whatever they want.
Go loot all that shit, that's mine. Stole that shit. Hell yeah! Oh damn! Oh Max. Nah, you cooking. I see it. Yeah, because if it, you know what I'm saying, if it wasn't for the police, these rich ass, you know what I'm saying, they wouldn't even be like flashy about their stuff, right? People would like have money, but then not even show because, yo, I could take it from you. Like nothing's gonna stop me. There's no police that you gonna call. Right?
Want without any fear of legal repercussions. Then, on the other end of the table, we've also got the state, which depends on capitalism. Because the owning class creates a lot of wealth, that also means they create a lot of tax revenue, which the state depends on for their governance of society. On top of that, having the support of economic elites legitimizes the state as an institution and its coercive authority, as wealth directly translates into power. Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that you can think of the state and capitalism like those little birds which sit on water buffaloes. The bird gets a tasty meal by eating all the parasites carrying disease, and the water buffalo, well, it doesn't get sick as a byproduct. This is a symbiotic relationship in which both parties mutually benefit from the other's existence. And I mean, hell, you don't need to look much further than the United States today to understand what anarchists are getting at. Musk donated close to $300 million to Trump's 2024 campaign and temporarily gained a position in government. Lobbyists from insurance and pharmaceutical companies have spent billions to prevent meaningful reform on healthcare. And I mean, fuck, you basically had over $1 trillion of wealth sitting front row at Trump's inauguration last year. To quote Noam Chomsky, in the real world, state policy is largely determined by those groups that command resources, ultimately by virtue of their ownership and management of the private economy or their status as wealthy professionals. The major decision-making positions in the executive branch of the government are typically filled by representatives of major corporations, banks and investment firms, a few law firms that cater primarily to corporate interests, and thus represent the broad interests of owners and managers rather than some parochial interest. Like seriously, I feel like we all know about the revolving door of politics in which elected representatives immediately move to become some lobbyist or leader of industry the second they lose their seat. For example, here in Australia, our former treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, was voted out in 2022 and then immediately became the chair of Goldman Sachs Australia. The former Premier of New South Wales, Dominic Perrottet, resigned in 2024 and immediately took up a position with BHP in Washington. And hell,
Like, you go from government to like a powerful position in just like the private sector. Well, shit, a respected position in the private sector. Golly.
Last Prime Minister Scott Morrison, that guy who shit himself in a McDonald's for international viewers,
Whoa.
he's been floating around a few lovely advisory positions.
Wait. Why did he do that though? He what himself?
Resigned in 2024 and immediately took up a position with BHP in Washington. And hell, our last Prime Minister Scott Morrison, that guy who shit himself in a McDonald's for international viewers, he's been floating around a few lovely advisory positions between Saudi oil companies and defense consultants. As Kropotkin said, these two concepts are inseparable. But okay, let's get a little more specific. What exactly do anarchists oppose when it comes to the state? Well, to put it simply, the state is just one massive hierarchy. Power is centralized in the hands of a few.
Nah, hold on, man. I feel like before we even get into that, y'all know what time it is, man. Word from the sponsors, fast.
Right before the fall, and now it's just over. Fat lady sings, I see the writing on the walls. I mean, back to the scene, cause it was pride before the fall. And now the demons grin, there's no temptation too tall, so it's forever. Yeah, imagination that shifted realities, till paradigms shift into shades you ain't never seen. Was once excited for all this, now I ain't trying to be seen. Forever. Cause this mind is straight chatter, but I can barely say something. Feel like shit don't matter.
Whew. That was quick, right? Ah, almost, man, almost. Alright, back at it, bro. Anarchism is a world. Check this. Check me out. Is a world without rulers possible? Leave your answer in the comments. Kicking it with Max Morrow currently. Let's hear more of it, my brother.
Are inseparable. But okay, let's get a little more specific.
Okay.
What exactly do anarchists oppose when it comes to the state? Well, to put it simply, the state is just one massive hierarchy. Power is centralized in the hands of a few at the very top, and they get to determine the rules and legislation which govern everybody else. At the drop of a hat, the state can limit your free speech if it's not in their interest, they can implement curfews, they can take your money and use it to fund faraway wars, and they can annihilate your right to privacy in the name of combating terrorism. For example, here in Sydney, we've recently had anti-protest laws passed after the Bondi terror attack, which have limited literally all forms of public assembly. Even if it's a protest on an issue completely unrelated to the tragedy which took place in Bondi, it's been a no-go. In fact, just the other week, a man by the name of Paul Silver planned a rally over Indigenous deaths in custody for January 18th, which is exactly 10 years after the death of his uncle. However, because of the laws in place, this demonstration was deemed illegal. The police lined up blocking the road, and they ordered the protesters to disperse for completely unjust reasons. This is the exact type of control and overreach which anarchists oppose, as it's antithetical to the rights we are entitled to as human beings. And look, it's important to note here that anarchists aren't just opposed to hyper-authoritarian regimes like North Korea and Russia. Their criticisms extend very much to liberal democracies as well. Now sure, it's definitely true that when anarchists were first writing in the 19th century, they were surrounded by tyrannical governments in the form of absolutist monarchies. There was Tsar Nicholas in Russia, there was Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany, and there was even King Leopold in Belgium, whose colonial rule in the Congo killed about 10 million people. That degree of brutality and despotism was definitely front of mind as they were developing anarchist theory, but their problems with governmental hierarchy extend much further than those particularly egregious examples of state power. To quote Zoe Baker, even if a state was somehow genuinely democratic in the sense that it was one in which the majority ruled, it was still a state, and so incompatible with freedom, equality, and solidarity. All states are social structures in which those who rule have the power to impose decisions on everyone within a given territory via institutionalized methods of coercion, such as the legal system, police, prisons, and the army. The rule of the majority would, even if it was preferable.
So all of these authority officials, right? All of those are at the mercy of whoever has the most cake, whoever got the biggest freaking wallet. Fuck. Yo, that is tough news, actually. Okay, you know, we knew this and how governments be corrupt and this, that, and the third, but really they are literally at the mercy of people with a lot of money. But then if you think about it, it's like, yo, the government and the resources that it needs to function, those things need to be just like manufactured or purchased or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, the people with the most money, they the ones that like can assist the best. And like really thinking about it is Just another level of hitting different, right?
To the rule of the few results in the domination of various minorities due to them being subject to this coercive power. This is a major point of criticism from the anarchist point of view, as a liberal democracy is still subject to a tyranny of the majority. I mean, think about it. Whenever there's a major federal election in your country, what does the final vote tally end up looking like? For example, if we go back to the 2024 election in the United States, you can see that Trump won 49.8% of the popular vote, whereas Kamala Harris won slightly less at just 48.3%. All things considered, that's a pretty tiny margin of victory, and it allows that 49.8% of Americans to impose their will on that slightly smaller 48.3% of Americans.
And it's damn near almost the same, but it's like, yo, just because of that little difference, right? Still got a bigger dig. No, my fault.
Contrast, this is something we'll talk about more later on, anarchists subscribe to the concept of free association. When people come together to form communities and groups, it should always be based on a voluntary and mutual agreement between free equals. If at any point the group you're in makes a decision that you're unhappy with and you can't convince others of your point of view, then you are free to leave without the fear of punishment or the use of coercive force. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to that position, especially when you start scaling up organizations to the level of millions of people, but principally, it sits in direct opposition to the majority rule you're subject to under a liberal democracy. Also, on the topic of free association, another criticism which anarchists would levy against the state is the fact we're never really given an opportunity to formally opt into this system. Basically, because you were born into a certain geographic territory by mere circumstance, you were therefore subject to—
Hey, you were born into this life of sin. Boom! Hey, you're born a sinner, born sinner.
The rules of whatever government has come along and claimed authority over that land.
Bro.
At no point does a representative of the state come to your house and ask for your written consent to join society, to represent you with any meaningful alternatives, and that's the definition of an involuntary agreement. Your only options today are 1, move to another nation state and subject yourself to their authority, or 2, find an uninhabited part of the Arctic Circle where you can create a commune free of state power and either freeze to death or be mauled by a polar bear. It's not a consensual agreement if those are your only 2 options. Now, to wrap things up here on why anarchists oppose the state, I want to take a look at one final example, which really highlights the absurdity of everything we've just discussed. Conscription. During the Vietnam War, more than 2.2 million men who were lucky enough to be born into the geographic territory known as the United States were forced to go and fight in a war against another geographic territory over 10,000.
Did you just say who were lucky enough to be born into the United States got chosen to go fight in a war? Wait, what part of that is luck?
Kilometers away who posed no threat but subscribed to a different ideology. Then, over the course of that conflict, which lasted 2 decades, 60,000 of those men were killed, 150,000 were injured, and countless more suffered from PTSD. And, to top it all off, if you did the same thing and refused to serve your military because it was a bullshit war, you could go to prison and be stripped of all your freedoms anyway. This is obviously an extreme example, but it illustrates perfectly why anarchists are so opposed to the idea of a state. Through the threat of coercion, a handful of powerful elites in government can dictate the terms of your life, they can send you to go and die in a war you want nothing to do with, and they can strip you of your freedoms at a moment's notice because that's just how it is. You reside in that territory and you are therefore subject to whatever that government decides. To an anarchist who believes in the absolute freedom of all human beings, this idea is simply untenable. So, with the state out the way, I think it's time we move to the slightly more controversial system which anarchists oppose.
What's that?
Capitalism. Now, to make things abundantly clear, because I don't want to leave any room for confusion, all anarchists, no matter what flavor they happen to be, are strictly anti-capitalist, aka they are socialists. They do not like capitalism in a house, and they do not like capitalism with a mouse. Now you might be wondering to yourself, oh, what about anarcho-capitalists? They've literally got it in their name. And don't worry, my dear fledgling, we'll get to those creatures in due course. So yeah, when it comes to the very broad category of socialism, anarchists represent the libertarian wing of the movement, you got some Marxists in the middle who are a little more pro-state, and then you got your wacky authoritarian Stalinists and Maoists all the way on the other side. I'm definitely being a little reductive here, but that's just to paint a general picture. But okay, that begs the question. Why are anarchists opposed to capitalism? Well, to understand why, I think it's important that we visit the context in which early anarchists were writing, because capitalism, well, it was a bit more of a brutal beast back then. This is something I genuinely don't think enough people know about today, because holy fuck, the beginning of capitalism marked a significant regression in living standards for the average person. To quote Rudolf Rocker, the enormous majority of the workers dwelt in miserable, dirty holes without even a glass window. They had to spend from 14 to 15 hours a day in the sweatshops of industry, innocent of either hygienic equipment or provision for the protection of the lives and health of the inmates. I mean, hell, just take a look at England, where the average life expectancy went from 43 in the 1500s to the low 30s in the 1700s. Additionally, worker rights were non-existent, child labor was the norm, and despite the fact workers were having their limbs crushed off by heavy machinery in unsafe factories, they were being paid fuck all for their troubles. Life was truly abysmal in the 18th and 19th centuries, and these were the conditions which inspired the emergence of anti-capitalist movements. Fortunately for us though, times have changed, and now we just ship all that soul-crushing and debilitating labor to the developing world so they can do it instead. You know, out of sight, out of mind. So, whilst on one hand you had the working class toiling away in a factory for 14 hours a day, grinding themselves to a dust, you also had a small portion of owners getting extremely rich off this arrangement without having to break a sweat. And this brings us to Socialism 101. To truly understand how workers are exploited in the creation of profit, let's take a look at a more modern example. If you were paid $10 per hour by McDonald's to flip burgers, for you to be of any worth to the company, you would have to necessarily produce more value than what you're paid in wages. If I had to hazard a guess, you're probably creating something like $30 worth of value per hour, yet you're only receiving a small portion back in wages. Now sure, McDonald's does have to pay for a lot of stuff, which you don't have to worry about as a worker. They buy the meat patties you're flipping, they pay for the maintenance on the stovetops, they pay for the electricity bills which keep the lights on, and there's a whole host of other things which they have to.
They got the budget for that shit. They got the budget for that. You know what I'm saying? It's not like before I applied for the job, they ain't had all that. They had all that. Alright, but let me let you finish, man. But it is fucked up though.
Account for as well. So, to drastically simplify things, of that $30 worth of value you've created, $10 goes back to you in wages, another $10 goes to all those costs we just talked about, and then that leaves us with $10 remaining. So, as I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat wondering, who gets that remaining money? Well, to borrow some Marxian terminology, that final $10 is what we call surplus value, and it goes to whoever owns the McDonald's in the form of profit. Although it was your labor which created all that value in the first place, you only get a sliver of it back in return, and this is what anarchists have a major problem with. In fact, it's from this concept that you find one of Proudhon's most famous quotes, property is theft. Now, just to be clear, when Proudhon uses the word property here, he's not referring to personal property like your toothbrush or the clothes you wear, he's referring to something known as private property. This refers to the type of stuff you can own and use to generate an income. For example, if you own an apartment, you can find a tenant and earn income when they pay you rent. If you have
basically your assets, right? At this point.
Have a shit ton of money lying around, you can lend it out to people and earn an income when they pay you interest. And as we talked about with McDonald's before, if you own a business, you can earn an income through the profits it generates. Now, from the anarchist perspective, all of these forms of private property basically equate to a legalized form of robbery. Because you as a worker don't own any private property and you need money to, well, you know, survive, that means you are forced to sell your labor to somebody who does own a business. Then, by virtue of that ownership, they are permitted to extract all the surplus value which you create in the form of profit, and you just kind of have to go along with this arrangement unless you want to be starving on the street. And it ties into what we were talking about earlier, the state legitimizes this whole arrangement. Property rights are enshrined into law, the courts uphold it, and the police are tasked with enforcing it. Now, this capitalist organization of the economy creates a pretty clear hierarchy in which there are two distinct classes of people. To borrow the words of Emma Goldman, there are those who always work but never have anything.
Oh yeah, that's probably where the division of the classes came through, right? Because obviously now if you have that class of people that are providing, you know, that are supplying the resources, you know, where workforce is required for that resource to be worked, and so that, you know, so that society can like go ahead and consume whatever it is they consume. It's like those, you know what I'm saying, those people, you know, pocket all the profits, and then the class of people that get like the what did he call it, the slithers, you know, the crumbs, the bits, that's like the lower class, like after that high class, right? The middle class, goddamn, that's the middle class. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what we about to break down next, bro. Let me see that.
And those who never work but enjoy everything. For the owning class, the accumulation of wealth and private property generates them an income without the need to labor, and, going back to our core principles of anarchism, this creates a highly unequal society in which true freedom is restricted to those who own everything. Especially back in those early days of capitalism, if you happen to be a worker who is spending 14 hours in a factory and barely being paid enough to survive, you're not really being presented an opportunity to freely develop yourself. The only creativity you got to exercise as a working class person back in the day was, I don't know, how much sawdust you can add to your bread though before your family notices that it tastes kinda weird. Now, it isn't just the fact that workers don't receive the full value of their labor under capitalism, which anarchists oppose. Perhaps more importantly, it's also the nature of the work we're doing, because, well, it's kind of awful. No matter where you happen to reside on the political spectrum, I think you'd agree that a lot of the jobs people are doing today are pretty unfulfilling, to say the least. Most people are stuck in middle management in some faceless corporation, or they're doing data entry or administration or some other completely intangible and abstract thing like filling out spreadsheets or sorting emails or whatever to that effect. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence that the vast majority of people report being emotionally detached at work, if not outright miserable, and it's only getting worse. And I mean, hell, if you think that we have it bad today, just think back to those poor bastards who were around when the anarchists were first writing. Guided by the profit motive, factory owners were incentivized to make their manufacturing process as efficient as possible so they could maximize how much they produced and therefore could
Look at the children working these factories, bro. Little kids.
sell. The most famous example of this in action, which came along a little later in the 1900s, was Fordism, the manufacturing process developed by Henry Ford to create a shit ton of cars for his motor company, forward. By breaking down the complex production of a car into small, simple, and repetitive tasks, which a worker can repeat all day, shit gets extremely efficient. I mean, hell, thanks to the innovation of the moving assembly line, workers didn't even need to move their legs because that would be a waste of time. And look, this is all great if you're trying to maximize profits, and there's no doubt that we owe a lot of our material living conditions today to the division of labor. However, this arrangement isn't so good if you're the poor worker standing in the same spot for 12 hours straight, repeating the same task thousands of times, only getting 1 day off per week for the entirety of your existence. This is a problem that the forefather of capitalism, Adam Smith, was aware of when it came to the division of labor, warning, the man whose life is spent in performing a few simple operations, of which the effects too are perhaps always the same or very nearly the same, has no occasion to exert his understanding or to exercise his invention in finding out expedients for removing difficulties which never occur. He naturally loses, therefore, the habit of such exertion and generally becomes as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. Do you remember that whole thing about—
Now imagine what that does to you as the individual, though. You know what I'm saying? It makes you stupid to even your own, you know what I'm saying? Like what you can tap into in terms of your own potential, bro. Because obviously now they suck all that energy of you gotta be at the factories, you gotta be at the work spots, you know what I'm saying? You gotta, and look, when I feel like when the this whole system was implemented, right? It was a whole revolution. Things were changing. People were experiencing a whole new possibility of how life is becoming. You know what I'm saying? Until, you know, the Great Awakening. Like, what else could we call it? Until the Great Awakening, where, like, from my perspective, right, it's much more of a crime, you know, to humanity when we consider the fact that you cannot even, you know, express your own self. You cannot tap into your own identity and its full potential is my whole thing. You know what I'm saying? Because your whole focus, your whole attention, your whole energy, blood, sweat, and tears is sucked out by, right, the labor that is demanded of you. You feel what I'm saying?
About positive liberty and freely developing the best version of yourself, which anarchists were rambling about. Well, yeah, I'm not really sure if being as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become is all that conducive to personal development. To borrow the words of Emma Goldman, this type of monotonous and mind-numbing labor treats workers as a mere particle of the machine with less will and decision than his master of steel and iron. And look, you could talk about anarchist critiques of capitalism until the fucking cows come home, but I'll limit it to one final point. When you're at work, you don't have an opportunity to exercise your autonomy in the production process. Once you've signed that contract and agreed to work for a certain company, you kind of just got to do what they say if you want to earn a living. Now sure, there's a limit to what they can ask you to do because some labor laws exist, but you're still subject to a strict chain of command where you're given orders and that's that. And look, whilst my experience in the workplace is rather limited due to my rather unconventional career path, talking worker autonomy reminds me of a story which my girlfriend told me about her job. Basically, she works for one of the big supermarket chains in Australia.
And not to mention, bro, like I feel like I've shared this in one of my other channels, right? The fact that, bro, once you're at work and then you are, you know, subject to that whole system of how, you know, you function during those hours that you're clocked into work, right? It's like there's aspects of you that you literally have to neglect, right? And that's the emotional aspects where, you know, you can have, like, you don't just act off the cuff, you don't just act emotional when you're at work, right? It's everything is systematized. You're there, you do what you're supposed to do there, you know what I'm saying, specifically at whatever specific time, you know what I mean? You're in customer service, customer cusses your ass off, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got no other option but to suck it up, you know what I mean? You know that whole saying, the customer is always right. The customer always wins. Like, some bullshit, you know what I'm saying? You gotta suck it all up. You work with colleagues that are just like unhinged, like animals of human, right? Animals. It's like, damn, bro. And you know, you get one of those days where they just disturb your soul, bruh. You just gotta suck it up, or you run the risk of like making a mistake, you know what I'm saying, having an emotional explosion, and then now it's like, yo, you gotta get dismissed. I'm not gonna lie, I'm talking from experience, bruh. It's crazy. talking from experience. So, and what that has taught me, you know what I'm saying, is the fact that to a certain extent, bro, you gotta neglect a very important aspect of you, a very significant aspect of yourself, bro. I'd say the emotional. You know what I mean? Leave it in the comments what you think is neglected when, you know, you integrate, you know, into the workforce and just get a 9 to 5, right? And function how you're supposed to function in a 9 to 5.
And a couple months ago, they asked all their employees to fill out a survey. Now, my girlfriend actually had some feedback to give because they'd recently implemented this bullshit procedure where employees had to spend at least 30 seconds with customers if they experienced an issue during checkout. It didn't matter if it was a relatively simple problem to fix that only took a couple seconds and didn't need an explanation. They were forced to spend half a minute with the customer, and they were surveilled by management to make sure they reached this arbitrary threshold. To quote directly from the feedback which my girlfriend gave them, this system forces many of us to pretend to be stupid, over-explain simple issues, and being instructed to work slowly to ensure we meet the allocated time frame, in turn intentionally wasting the customer's time and causing them frustration, which is often verbally taken out on us.
Hey, and y'all know them customers, bruh. Yo, customers, bruh. Damn, that's a different type of animal. Customer is a different type of animal, my boy. You feel me? Oh man, damn, is there any like customer, you know, like a job where you deal with customers, right? And then the customer doesn't have this this right, quote unquote right, this right where they're right. They're always right. It's like they're the ones, you know, their word is taken as top priority, da da da. And I get the fact that, you know, it's because of them that the business runs. It's because of them that, you know, people can get paid, like workers can get paid there. It's because of them and shit like that. But like, don't be a freaking dick. Don't be a dickhead about it. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's the whole point of it. Like at the end of the day, you see what I'm saying? Because you do get human beings that like just like take that side out of you, bro. Like, we talking about customers? Damn.
Already, you can probably see that we're dealing with an awful system implemented by some out-of-touch higher-up who has no idea what it's like to work on the ground, but the story doesn't end there. When my girlfriend actually took the time to write that detailed feedback on this procedure, she was immediately ostracized by management and treated weirdly for doing, well, exactly what they asked them to do. All her fellow employees simply zoomed through the survey without providing any specific feedback, but when she actually wanted to help speed things up and make things run more smoothly, which would also help the company's bottom line, she was given the cold shoulder. That minute degree of autonomy afforded to her in the form of a survey ultimately amounted to nothing, and it's this hierarchical structure in which a worker has no say and no input in the labor they're doing, which anarchists vehemently oppose. To once again quote Chomsky, a frequency which I'm sure all the real anarchists are loving, it's ridiculous to talk about freedom in a society dominated by huge corporations. What kind of freedom is there inside a corporation? They're totalitarian institutions. You take orders from above and maybe give them to people below you. That's about as much freedom as under Stalinism. Chomsky said that back in the 1980s, and now, with the rise of surveillance and AI monitoring to ensure workers aren't procrastinating, his point is more relevant than ever.